Hello and welcome to this Geeky Brummie special issue where we'll be talking everything Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Joining me today, Mr. Keith Bloomfield. Welcome.
Hello Ryan and everybody else.
How are we?
I'm all good, thank you very much.
Cool. So, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. The fifth
Instalment.
Fifth, if you count the Crystal Skull.
We count the Crystal Skull.
The fifth instalment. So, 43 years now? Was Harrison Ford?
1981, so 42
years that Harrison Ford has played the eponymous titular character, Indiana Jones. What was your initial thoughts?
Well, as you may know, from when the trailer first dropped, I was very excited about this film. Really looking forward to it. Every time I saw the trailer in the cinemas, with that transition from the Rolling Stones into the Indy March, I was like... and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It delivered everything I wanted from an Indiana Jones movie.
Mm-hmm.
Treated the aging of the character quite nicely.
Yeah.
Although I would have much preferred Indy not to have been a grumpy old man, which is a bit of a stereotype that I think is a bit lost, considering where we left him after the end of Crystal Skull.
Yeah.
It would have been nice for him to be a bit more kind of balanced. Although what has happened to his family during the intervening years was quite intense, and I can understand how he might react to that idea of having connected with the son and then things happen. So we won't spoil it, but things happen, and you see that quite early on before they even tell you. There's things, in the shots that kind of explain what's happened to.
Because I was kind of, although Kingdom of the Crystal Skull is probably still the worst out of all the Indiana Jones movies, it had quite a nice bow on the end of it. It was kind of wrapped it up quite nicely. Where we left it, married to Marion, got his son, can finally retire. This was what, 2008, 2009?
Possibly, maybe even less than that actually.
Yeah, it's been a few years since he's put the hat and the whip on, but it was quite nice. It was Indiana Jones is done as a character, so I don't see why this film has been made to another point. I mean, James Mangold was always going to have an issue stepping into Spielberg's shoes as well. It's kind of Spielberg and Indiana Jones are kind of synonymous with each other. Was it good enough to count as an Indiana Jones film?
I think it had enough of the character, and I think most of that is down to Harrison Ford.
Yeah,
Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones. Yeah,
it's the most favourite character he's played over his many years acting. I think,
and it kind of throws the kind of young Indiana Jones Chronicles kind of history out, because that has a different aged Indy. If anybody's ever seen the Indiana Jones Chronicles, there's an older Indy that appears in that, who I believe has lost an eye in the intervening years and stuff. And he's not quite the grumpy old man that we get here. So it kind of throws that kind of George Lucas version of an older Indy out the window a little bit. But I don't know, I think there's parts of it that were much like Mangold did with Logan. Yeah. That kind of, we're getting to a point where, that this actor's moving away from these particular characters, so we kind of want to wrap it up a little bit.
I mean, it pretty much opens with mild spoilers. Indiana Jones's retirement from university. He's in with a load of beatniks in the late 60s. It's the moon landings just happened, so the astronauts are coming back to New York for their triumphant parade, and he cannot keep an audience anymore. Is the way that I
kind of like that throwback to the Indy we see in Raiders, where the students are absolutely besotted with him. To this, we don't care now, it's moonshots and Beatles and... Yeah,
nobody cares about archaeology anymore, it's all about technology in the future, and I think it was that kind of parallel going back to the original trilogy of, he's not renowned anymore, he's a bit of a fossil.
Yeah. Well, and it kind of also reflects the kind of modern idea of, the claiming of antiquities for people other than who they actually belong to. So there's a little bit kind of like that idea of who really is he really a good guy basically stealing stuff,
hiding stuff away from the Nazis?
Even the idea of it belongs in a museum, which is quite interestingly contrasted with the Phoebe Waller-Bridge character, who is much more interested in antiquities as a cash resource.
I was kind of disappointed, and again, mild spoilers, that it's Nazis again as the villain, and it's kind of 1969 and we've still got Nazis as the villain.
But they're so good as villains.
I know they're so good as villains, but it was kind of just, guys, you've had 4 films of this now. You brought them back in the 50s with like nuclear tests going on.
It was the Russians in the Crystal Skull.
Was it Russians? I thought it was Nazis. Yeah. But it was so 2008 was Crystal Skull, by the way.
That's 15 years.
Yeah. So, but Dial of Destiny, back to the Nazis. I mean, Mads Mikkelsen is great at playing a good character villain, and he works really, really well in this as kind of a nice kind of foil to Indiana Jones. And he's a scientist himself. He's an archaeologist to a certain extent. He's researching artifacts, and he knows his stuff. He's just wanted to use it for more nefarious means. I mean, what do we think of Toby Jones in it?
I quite liked that he was an antiques hunter.
Yeah.
Because, I love the Detectorists, so that was quite cool. But that whole opening 20 odd minutes with the de-aged Harrison Ford was that would have worked as a sequel, Indiana Jones sequel by itself. Yeah.
I mean, the technology and the CGI is really good.
Yeah.
Apart from the final act, where I found it quite lacking, but we'll come on to that.
Yeah. But that whole kind of like Indiana Jones pulp adventure, where Indy was still capable of, running around on tops of trains and all the rest of it, was quite nice to, again, get that contrast between the young adventurer and the slightly more jaded older man. I, as an older man myself, and having watched Indiana Jones when it first came out, I kind of appreciated that idea of, time catches up with everybody. And certain things become more important as you get older.
So as mentioned, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, Helena as a character, she comes into Indiana Jones' life after many years, and she's his goddaughter, and it's kind of like gets him back on the road again, gets him back to having an adventure. And as such, we kind of start getting the globe hopping, which is, Tangier's first, I think.
Yes, I think that's where they end up first.
Yes.
Yeah, they do quite a bit of globe hopping.
Yeah, so it's Tangier's first, and then it's a little bit of... So we're introduced to Teddy, who is this one's short round, basically. Yeah. We need a child character in every Indiana Jones movie. I think poor Teddy was probably not very good. It's probably the weakest.
I don't think he was particularly well served by what he had to do.
Yeah.
So he wasn't as impactful a character as short round.
Yeah.
He was basically the sidekick for Helena.
Yeah.
So kind of gets introduced quite late in the movie and doesn't really have that much to do other than be a reason for characters to do certain things. So
it's a little bit of the Rube Goldberg machine in the background. It's like a bit of a Deus Ex machinery. He just sets stuff off in the background and then fixes plot holes, basically.
Yeah. But I mean, as well, we get John Rhys Davies back as Salah, which was quite nice with his family.
I was quite a little bit disappointed when, again, minor spoilers, he drops him off at the airport. He's like, I can come with you again. It's kind of like, no, you're too old. And it's like, you're no spring chicken yourself here, Indiana Jones. And it's kind of...
But that's quite a nice little comedy sequence where he goes, give him hell, Indiana Jones. And Indy almost gets run over by a taxi. And it's like, you just think, oh, here we are.
Yeah. I mean, it was nice. It was just, I think, underutilised character. I think he could have probably been in it quite a lot more.
Yeah, but then, we have Antonio Banderas introduced as well.
Yeah, so I was just about to say that. So Antonio Banderas, which is kind of the longest cameo in cinema, is not really a fully fleshed out character, but it feels more like, we'll just throw him in because he was like, I'm being in an Indiana Jones film, I'm free for the next 2 weeks.
And he was quite cool.
I can go and film in the Adriatic Sea and just like, it's quite nice.
Yeah, I kind of like that underwater sequence. It was quite good. Yeah. With eels instead of snakes. That was quite
sea snakes. Yeah,
that was quite nice. Although the one thing about that sequence that bugged me terribly, and I saw it twice in the same day, was one of the characters doesn't keep diving.
Yeah.
Yet all 4 of the air tubes keep rolling
exactly
off.
The same extent.
And I'm like, but one of them's not moving. Why is that going down? It was just a minor thing that I was just going, oh, come on, please. Twice I was like, that got me.
Yeah, so they're in the Aegean Sea, sorry, not the Adriatic Sea, and then they pop over to Sicily for the next bit, and you got a sequence with some caves and some puzzles, which felt, this is proper indie to me.
Yeah, not quite as many booby traps as I would have liked in that kind of end sequence, because we're kind of used to that, temple raiding.
Yeah, I mean, there was
traps.
A couple, but But it was kind of, this is what drew me to Indiana Jones. It was the whole kind of the tomb raiding element of it. He goes somewhere mystical and there's something to be found and there's always going to be something creepy down there.
And using his intelligence to figure stuff out.
Yes.
That's one of the beauties of like the fact that he's a man of science.
Yeah.
So he uses his brain rather than his brawn. He's got his whip, and there is a nice callback reversal of the classic indie
whip versus gun.
Yeah, that was a nice little throwback to where it goes, no, this isn't going to work. I quite enjoyed that part, but the whole movie just kind of reeked of let's just have some fun.
Yeah,
it wasn't trying to do anything kind of new and innovative, which it didn't need to. Perhaps there's a bit too much of us wanting nostalgia, things from our childhood back.
And I think,
but I kind of, it was nice. I kind of, I was never going to turn down an indie movie.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose we could really come on to the big controversy, which a lot of people have been talking about. So, massive spoilers time. There is an element of time travel in this movie, and it's kind of, a lot of people have had their immersion broken due to that time element sequence of it just doesn't work, and it's the whole Archimedes dial is a way that is calculated that time changes and time's not linear, and then you can go back in time, and that's kind of the driving plot of the film as such, is you can move in time.
Yeah.
So the whole plot is the reason the Nazis are after this. They go back to 1939. They can go just before Hitler invades Poland, and it was basically so Mads Mikkelsen's character, who knew the future, could take over and become the Führer himself and become, I know everything that went wrong, so I can do it right.
But I can't understand why anybody would think that this is kind of like odd for an Indiana Jones movie, because basically every Indiana Jones movie is centered around an artifact with some kind of mystical thing. I mean, when I was a kid, the whole idea of Tales of the Unexpected, or the Leonard Nimoy series, where crystal skulls, Loch Ness monsters, Yetis, this whole idea of kind of weird things happening, and I kind of like the Indiana Jones finding an artifact. It's your whole Warehouse 13 thing of like, here's the thing, you've got the Wrath of God in a box, you've got...
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you can agree with Nazis being melted like a wax candle when a box opens, and a 500-year-old crusader just kicking around in a cave in Petra for 500 years... And aliens with the crystal skull.
Aliens. Well, they're interdimensional beings, but every indie movie ends with some kind of.
Well, the whole ripping a heart out of somebody and glowing stones is
the whole Shankara stones thing was about. They all went back, and that brought the land back to life. So they've all got an element of fantastical thing, which is what you want from that kind of pulp adventure. You look at your Edgar Rice Burroughs and all the rest of it. That's got Hollow Earth. That's got all these
the Martians. Even if you look at the Tarzan and King Solomon's Mine stuff, they all have that fantastical element.
I mean, I'd be quite happy for Indiana Jones meets dinosaurs. To be honest, in a Hollow Earth kind of thing. Give me that. I'm down for this kind of stuff. Yeah,
I mean, and it's kind of subtly being left open that Helena could be the new Indiana female Jones, but it's kind of like leave it alone now.
That's it. Now Harrison has taken the hat. It's not there for anybody else to grab.
Yeah, and I think that was the original thing behind Crystal Skull was, well, perhaps we can. Shia LaBeouf's character of Mutt was going to continue the.
I've never really understood that idea of like let somebody else take out. It's called Indiana Jones. Yeah. And he is Indiana Jones. Yeah. It's not James
Jones.
Bond. It's not
like, Helena, not Jones.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like I've never really understood that. Come up with a new character. Yeah. Create another pulp adventurer. Yeah. That would work. It's worked in TV. It's worked in kind of there's a whole range of other characters that I haven't really seen silver screen
Yeah.
stuff. You know, I'm a big fan of the Ron Eli Doc Savage movie from the 60s.
Man of Bronze.
Yeah, that's just nuts, but I kind of like that stuff. And they've got Buckaroo Banzai is another kind of in that trope of these kind of characters.
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, though it gets panned, it still has some really good pulpy moments in it. It's got some fantastic scenes. It's got some good fun. The whole Captain Nemo stuff in that is great. That's really good. But no, Harrison he's that character, and I don't think maybe when I've passed away, and you know it's a whole other generation, and maybe if they reintroduce Indiana Jones back, then maybe I'll be. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I really liked about it was it reminded me that cinema is not just superhero movies and action films. It's kind of, there is still space for story-led movies. I mean, it is in essence, it's an action film, but I think it's a story-driven movie more than an action film as such. It's kind of, you're following Indiana's journey rather than it just being set action pieces with very thin plot put together. And it's kind of, there are moments in it, but it's kind of, you can see a proper story and a plot has been mapped out, and it's not just hung around. We're going to have a big action set piece and work backwards, which is kind of where Marvel and like the Fast and Furious movies do. This is going to be the big action sequence, and we'll work backwards. I mean, we've got Mission Impossible at the cinema now, which is the 7th film in the franchise. We're going to have Oppenheimer and Barbie, which is 2 newish ones, but they're still kind of existing. Well, not so much Oppenheimer, but Barbie is something that's been in common knowledge and pulled for a long time. Do you think cinema needs to start going back to having something which isn't a sequel or a franchise or something a bit different?
Yeah, I think there's still plenty of films that are doing that. New films that are coming out all the time. That I think it's just the audience. It's an easy win to have the next Marvel installment or the next DC or a character from the past returning. But I also think the style of film needs to kind of dial it back a little bit, especially when it comes to action. Because one of the beauties of the original 3 indie films is if you look back at that action, it's fairly slow and it's fairly simplistic.
It's not massive,
It's not frenetic. You know, you've got Indi caught on the side of a tank being ground against a wall. I'd
probably say the minecart sequence is a little bit frenetic. But
but I mean, that was the one-off. But most of the time, you've got Indi in jeopardy, and it feels real. So where you get kind of
small scale, it's not universe.
It's intimate. You know, intimate action. Is what I would call it. Whereas when Crystal Skull had a lot of it, particularly was the over reliance on CGI to make something seem more spectacular.
I mean, the whole fridge sequence was just it was too far, I think.
And I think they rein it back a little bit in Dial of Destiny. The tuk-tuk sequences are probably a little bit edging towards kind of a little too much.
I thought it was more slapstick rather than action at some points.
But the physicality was lacking. That's the problem with when you've got that kind of, if you're going for that comedy, it needs to be more physical. And it's noticeable that it's a little bit CGI.
It's a little bit flat,
but I think it works. The sequence with Indi in the subway tunnel with the horse, that works really brilliantly because it is just Indi and a horse, and so it's very simplistic.
And the whole progenitions of that scene is him quick thinking. It's how do I get out of this situation? There's a horse there. I'm going to jump on the horse and know how to ride a horse.
So that sequence works really well, even though we know kind of that New York is mostly CGI, but that works really well in that kind of. We keep it simple, and it's about just one character and a very simple situation. I'm on a horse in a subway. How do I get out of this? And I think that works really nicely.
And I think everybody who goes to watch it or who has watched it are probably going to realise it's never going to match the original trilogy because those kind of films don't get made anymore. It's kind of, Harrison Ford's 80 something now, so he's not going to be physical, he's not going to be running around. And it is one of the bad things about Quantumania, which if you watch the Ant-Man movie, which is Michael Douglas has sat down the entirety of that movie. There is never a scene where he stood up for more than 30 seconds, I think. And as soon as you start to twig, well, he's not going to be doing action. It's just, I'll pilot the ship, or I'll sit behind this desk and tell you about things, or I'll be at the kitchen table.
But I think that's the problem with the action is in other films it's just too much. There's too much going on, and I find that I don't care.
It's spectacle over substance.
I don't feel anything. I don't feel any sense of danger for that character.
Yeah.
Whereas when like I said in Last Crusade, when Indy's hanging by his bag strap from the side of the tank and it's about to crash into a wall, there's literally nothing going on in that shot. It's really a nothing shot.
Well,
but you kind of feel for like, oh my god, how's Indy going to get out of this?
Well, you got the cut away to stuff like we've got Sean Connery's character in those sequences, and like what's his face, John Rhys Davies, and those they're separate to that action, and it is, as you said, hyper focused on Indy and his personal battle.
It's just the intensity of that action without 100 things going on. It's very simple, but I feel I can emote and relate to the situation that Indy or even any of the other characters is in. There's a predicament to them, and when if you see 100 people in a big punch up, it's like, well, I don't really care.
So what do you think of Mads Mikkelsen as kind of the villain of this piece? I mean, he's great, but it feels, to me, it felt a little bit like a workman-like performance.
It's a bit thinly drawn.
Yes,
as a character,
you don't get enough time with him to establish it.
He embodies it so well.
Yeah,
and there's not enough made of the relationship, the setup of him meeting Indy in the beginning of the film. Yeah, doesn't pay off as much as you would like. No. Whereas a character like Balok and Raiders, you get a palpable sense of their history. Yeah, and what's going on with them there. So it's kind of interesting. But he's a great actor. He does a good job. He brings menace to a character, but also brings charm. Yeah. So you can understand why people would follow him and do what he wants and all the rest of it. Yeah. But yeah,
so he's great. So to wrap up, a fitting addition to the Indiana Jones.
A great addition to the franchise. Yeah. Probably not as sweet an ending as Crusade. Yeah. Which kind of is.
I'd say not even as sweet as ending as Kingdom, to be honest.
No. But I just felt they missed a chance at the ending where Indy and Marion, spoilers, the whole "where doesn't it hurt" sequence. Yeah, and he doesn't go. Yeah. Here. Yeah. Which I would have. That would have really. That for me, that would have really wrapped it up. That he ended with that and a here. Yeah. That would have just been. That would have been perfect. Yeah. I would have loved that, but. Yeah, I was thrilled, entertained. I mean, I went to see it twice in one day.
So I was like, this. So you had your full-on IMAX experience.
I had the big experience in a modern cinema, and then on the evening I went to see it in the same cinema I'd seen every other one before. So 1981, and then every other indie film in the same cinema.
So which one was the better experience?
The older cinema.
It'll just take you back.
Just because of the history of that whole thing. I can remember being in the same room, different seats, watching Last Crusade, being in the same room with my kids watching Crystal Skull. Yeah.
I mean, it's been out a couple of weeks by the time we're recording this, and it's kind of been viewed pretty much as a flop, unfortunately. Yeah. But I think there's this whole thing of Hollywood is now relying, as we said, on franchises and historic actors to the state of if you're a parent and you're dragging your partner and a couple of kids, that's 65 quid now, ticket wise, plus your snacks, plus your drinks. So you need something bankable. Yeah.
Well, it's the cost of making a film. Yeah. As well now, because I think this particular indie was probably a $200 million production. Yeah. And when you look at the budgets of the first three films, which are probably...
And I assume COVID did not help the situation with the filming schedule and things like that, but I don't know. I think it deserves to be not viewed as a flop.
No. I think it's another one where it's the critics who are harsh on it, but audiences loved it.
Yeah. And I think the problem, as you said, critics are going to go in and expect the original three trilogy remade. And to be fair... James Mangold, though he's a great director, he hasn't got Spielberg's touch.
No. Yeah, there's a certain... And the George Lucasness of the stories.
Yeah, not having Lucas on the story probably isn't great.
But it still works, Yeah. I liked a lot of the Indiana Jones Adventures, the Young Indiana Jones Adventures, which were the TV shows. Yeah. They were really great as well. That expanded on the kind of whole history of Indy.
I'm hoping it's going to find a home audience because it's going to be on Disney Plus within probably a couple of months nowadays. The way things go. So if you've missed it in the cinema, I'm sure it's on Disney Plus within a couple of months. But I'm hoping it finds a home audience and people get to see. It's kind of it feels really touching because it feels like this is probably Harrison Ford's last film.
But, yeah, possibly.
And I think as a character, it's always been discussed about he hates Han Solo as a character. He always hates Han Solo, and it's always been a pain in the arse to do Star Wars. And I find it feels quite fitting that this could be his last film because he's always loved the character of Indiana Jones, and that's always been his kind of favourite person to play. And 40 years of playing the same character, you kind of probably bed in quite a bit.
Yeah. I would like him to do the voice for Indy in the Indiana Jones game.
Yes.
Coming out. That would be great. But the one thing we haven't touched on, and one of the things that is quintessentially part of Indi for me, is John Williams' music.
Yes. And again, probably one of the last John Williams scores that we're going to get.
I think he's said like in the last few weeks that he's just going to, as long as people want him to keep doing it, he's going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
But again, everything is there in that score.
Yeah.
You know, the whole
you get the
themes from
you get the
all
reprisals,
the previous films.
yeah.
And there is something about that. John Williams is the king of that emotional beat, of that theme for a character that nails the character and takes you back to that, you know, just even the tiniest hint of the Raiders March, and
you're back.
You're just straight there, and it's just like, you know, and he does a spectacular job. Although whoever's put out the soundtrack, end credit music on the soundtrack, please. That's what we want. We want the end credit sound music on the soundtrack. You stopped doing it for lots of soundtracks. So Warner Brothers Music or 20th Century Fox or whoever's doing this, Paramount.
That's the other thing with the Paramount logo popping up. I was like, geez, where does that come from?
But it didn't segue into the Paramount Mountain. They used the Lucasfilm one into a lock, and it's like, that's not quite the same.
Yeah.
But I miss that. But yeah, John Williams' score, it ties the whole thing together.
Yeah.
You know, there's that definite history. Even though we lose the influence of Spielberg and Lucas, having John Williams, the maestro, there to go, it's still Indy.
Yeah, I think to me the highlight was the train sequence at the start. It felt very much like this could have been dropped into any of the original three films. It was fantastically well done. I assume Harrison Ford's involvement in that was probably quite minimal due to his age, and I know they've used a lot of doubles and a lot of CGI to get him back in there. But it was just that bit with the torch on the uniform was like, well, this is classic Indiana Jones to me, and that was kind of that brought me back. And I don't think the rest of the film unfortunately lived up to that initial opening sequence, but it was still good. It was still great. It's still better than Crystal Skull by a country mile. It's as good as Young Indiana Jones, which was one of my favourite things when I was a kid watching that on TV, because that was how I got into Indiana Jones. It was I watched that before I watched the film, so it's really nice. But it was kind of some great set pieces, heart for the character. The plot is workmanlike but good enough to get you through. As I said, it's just something's missing there, I think.
Yeah, but it's fun and entertaining.
Yeah, if you want 2 hours?
I think it's about two and a half hours.
So if you want 2.5 hours where you can switch your brain off and enjoy an action film again, there is nothing wrong with this nowadays.
Yeah, it does what it needs to do. Yeah, and it's Indiana Jones. It's witty, it's entertaining, it's got action, it's got heart. So I loved it. I really enjoyed it. You know, it didn't disappoint.
No.
And at this point with modern cinema, I couldn't ask for any more.